Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's panel debate, Are Refugees Bankable? And hello to everyone watching us now or later, and also thank you for all today joining us. I want to thank, first of all, to the organizers of Copenhagen 2021. I know this is not the typical topic of this event, but it's really amazing that the stage has been open to other groups than the LGBT community. And it is all about inclusion, and it is about diversity. And refugees are part of the underrepresented communities. And we're really, really happy that we have been giving this stage today. My name is Hacer. I am the founder of a Copenhagen-based startup called Celebrate, and we're facilitating conversations in small coffee shops around some stigmatized and polarized topics. So when I was approached to moderate this debate today, I was obviously all ears to hear how we can tackle the issue around financial inclusion in Denmark. I'm joined by three experts: Marie Olafsdottir from Finklusiv, Githa Kurdahl from Oikos, and Christian Friis Bach from Warfare. Thank you, all three of you, for taking your time, for being with us, and for sharing your experience and your perspectives on how we can tackle the issue around financial inclusion in Denmark and abroad. We got 1 hour together, and my aim is to use these 60 minutes to get a better understanding of the scope of financial exclusion. I will use my panelists to identify who is affected and by this problem, as well as what causes it, actually. And every problem comes with a solution, and therefore I would like to hear from you, what are the concrete, I'm kind of curious to hear, like, what are the concrete solutions you have in mind that could create a better and equal access for everyone, for all, to the formal banking sector in Denmark, as well as maybe abroad. I've reserved 15 minutes at the end for you, so that you can ask questions. So try to remember them until the end, and if there are a few questions, I have always backup questions. So just be patient to ask your questions. So again, Marie, Githa, and Christian, thank you so much for being here. I've done some homework and done some stalking on all of you, but my research is obviously based on just, your online versions. So I would like to start with maybe hearing from you with your own words, who you are, what you do in your daily life and in your daily work, and what you do to challenge and tackle the financial inclusion or exclusion in Denmark. So Marie, maybe we could start with you. Could you just tell us a bit about yourself, about your daily work, and how your work relates to promoting financial inclusion?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me? Hello? It works now. Thank you so much for the introduction, Hacer, and thank you for the organizers of Copenhagen 2021 to give us this opportunity. We're really happy for it. So, my name is Marie. I'm the founder of Finklusiv, which is short for financial inclusion. We're a social startup. And what we do is that hello? Can you hear me? Yeah? Is it working? Yeah, okay. So what we do is that we support business owners who have received asylum in Denmark to set their business up for success with business-related services and support for access to banking, primarily business accounts. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I arrived in Denmark in 2017 together with my family. And as a binational daughter of diplomats, I have to say I'm a professional immigrant. I'm a foreigner wherever I go. Of course, a very privileged one. So I did what every newcomer does when I arrived here. I started observing how the country is organized, And as my professional background is in startup support and microfinance, I quickly found that although the country is extremely well organized to support innovative startups and university-bred ventures, there's not so much to support the underprivileged ones, people who create a business in order to create a livelihood for themselves. And these people are mostly in the service industry, so they are the delivery guys, like Volt, for example, that you may know, the subcontracted drivers, the kiosk owners, caterers, hairdressers, and COVID-19 has shown in the last 2 years how important they are to us as a society. So why? Denmark is a very egalitarian society. It's at the core of Danish values. So I was told by some, maybe there's no need. But the more I started interviewing organizations working with startup support and immigration, the more I got confirmation that there indeed is a need. And I eventually met Githa from Andelskassen Oikos, and she told me that the bank was receiving requests from refugee business owners, and they wanted to do something for them, but you had to tackle with a lot of regulations and a lot of administrative work regarding anti-money laundering, so you were looking for a solution. So we agreed to set up a pilot, and I created my social business Finklusiv in 2019 to answer that need. Today, I can confirm that access to banking for business owners with a migrant background is extremely difficult. Usually, when they come to us, it's not uncommon that they have talked to 6 to 8 banks, including the one they have their private accounts, and they've received a no from everywhere, even when everything else is in place and they're ready to start to work. So, just to give you an example, I was contacted the other day by a guy who started his taxi service. So he had everything in place. He had the licenses, he had a leased car. He started, in fact, working with Dan Taxi a few months back, but he didn't expect that getting a business account would be so difficult. And when he called me, he had 200,000 crowns blocked at Dan Taxi and no account to transfer it to. So we're talking here about a guy who's been working. He has money that he cannot access. He has a wife, 2 small children, not able to pay for his daily needs, not able to contribute to society. And we're contacted daily by people who are facing these issues. We're getting so many requests that we cannot cater to today because the need is just overwhelming. So what we do is that we support the business owner, we help them prepare their request, we make an informed recommendation to the bank, and what's more important is that we help them understand what the requirements of a Danish bank are and how to make sure that they have a good business relationship with their bank. So in fact, we prepare them to be good clients for the bank, so the relationship is win-win going forward. So we've been quite successful because so far 75% of our recommendations have been approved. And I must say that each and one of these business owners that we've worked with are so inspiring for everything that they've gone through and how, the drive that they have to set up for future success. And I'm sure you can confirm that because you know each and one of them personally. So the question is not anymore, is there need for entrepreneurship support for the underprivileged in Denmark? In fact, there's much more need than we can cater to right now. So we're constantly looking for different sources of funding, and we're looking for new partnerships in order to be able to provide more services to these business owners and set them up for the success that they deserve going forward. So before I finish, I just want to stress out that this is not a small local problem. There are more than 300,000 refugees in Scandinavia only, and if we consider that 10% of them are going to be independent, that's 30,000 businesses. If you look at the European Union, it's 170,000 businesses that are managed by refugees. So this is not a problem that is going away. And we want to be the link between the banks and these entrepreneurs for the good of everyone, in fact. So if you want to go up and meet, I'm going to stay after the debate. And if you're online, please Google us. We're at finklusiv.dk. Do contact us because we love to discuss about how we can support more refugee entrepreneurs in the future. Many thanks.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for for making, first of all, clear that this is not a small problem, and there is a need, and you're also making clear and stressing that not making it about emotional, the life of underrepresented groups and refugees. You're saying how they're actually contributing to the society and trying to become independent and create their own future. Thank you so much. All right, Githa, Marie has already mentioned you, and it seems you ladies work very closely with each other. And so you are working at Andelskassen Oikos, a value-based bank. Could you just tell us a bit about, more about yourself and also your work at Oikos and how that relates to financial inclusion in Denmark? Thank you.
I don't know. Yeah, it's working now. Great. Yeah, so my name is Githa, and as you both said now, I work at a small cooperative bank here in Copenhagen called Andelskassen Oikos. And in many ways, Oikos is what people would call a normal bank. We have private customers who have your salary accounts, housing loans, and credit facilities, and all that you need as a private customer. But in other ways, Oikos is not a normal bank, because since the mid-1990s, when Oikos was founded by a small group of idealists, we've had a dual purpose. So you can say, on the one hand, we want to be a really good bank, like a really good bank for our private customers here in Denmark. And at the same time, we also want to make a difference for marginalized groups around the world. And we've been doing that primarily through supporting microfinance projects. So you can say that financial inclusion is kind of part of our DNA, in a sense. But for 20 years, we've only had an international focus. In fact, we didn't consider lack of financial inclusion to even be a problem in Denmark. That was something that we needed to address in developing countries and not here. So it wasn't until a few years ago we started noticing that there were more and more business owners, refugee business owners, that came to us and explained that they were being rejected by the bigger banks. And so we started, with financial inclusion being part of our DNA, we recognize financial exclusion when we see it. So we thought, okay, there's actually people here in Denmark who don't have access to a bank, and we need to address that. So that's why we decided to team up with Marie and Finklusiv and see what we could do about it here in our own country. So it would be really easy for me to stand here today and just point my finger at the bigger banks and blame them for not taking a social responsibility in helping refugees. But the truth is that I actually understand very well why they're rejecting refugee business owners. And I thought maybe I would just take the opportunity today to list the main reasons as I see them. So I found 4. This will maybe be a little bit technical, but just bear with me and ask questions if you want to, if you need to. But so first of all, we have regulation. As Marie already mentioned, the banks are under very, very heavy regulation. And we have what's known as KYC, which is Know Your Client regulation, and we have AML, anti-money laundering regulation. And that actually means that small businesses in general, not just refugee-owned businesses, but small businesses in general, require a lot of resources for the banks. We need to monitor every single transaction that goes through an account. We also have to document a lot of things that we didn't have to do in the past. So regulation is definitely a big factor in this. A second thing is the business case. As any other business, the banks also need to make money. And so when you look at the business case, the small businesses are very rarely a source of profit for the banks. So often it's the opposite. Because of all the regulation, it actually costs money to have these businesses as clients. So the business case is not there. Then we have to look at risk. Refugee business owners are perceived to be riskier than other customer groups. They have ties to high-risk countries, otherwise they wouldn't be refugees, so that's natural. They often open businesses in industries that have a bad reputation. Marie already mentioned that you have kiosks or fast food restaurants, candy shops, those kind of industries that we all use and we all need them in our daily lives, but they have bad reputation, so high risk. And then, of course, you have the legal status of refugees. Sometimes there are uncertainties around that. We all know that some of them risk, being sent home. So what happens to their business if all of a sudden they have to leave Denmark? So there are some risk factors there that are higher. And banks don't like risk. It's just a fundamental part of their operations, of the bank's being, that banks have to minimize risk at all times. So the fourth thing I wanted to just highlight is language and culture, because it's my impression that language and culture actually also weigh in when the banks say no. We have a certain way of doing business in Denmark. We don't like cash, for instance. We have very strict division or separation of business and private expenses. We don't mix that. But I'm sure as anyone who's worked in developing countries or in other cultures know that's not the case in other business cultures. You can mix those two pots. We don't do that in Denmark. And also, we generally don't borrow money from friends and family for business purposes, but that's also common in other cultures. So the banks have developed very standardized methods to understand their customers. And so when you have a foreign culture and you try to kind of push that into a box, wow, it's raining a lot now. So when you try to push that and squeeze that into a box, that can be very difficult. And if you then add language difficulties on top, a lot of the refugees have been here maybe 5 or 6 years, then you have a lot of barriers. And so when you're a bank and you're faced with an application from a refugee business owner, and you add up all of these things, the conclusion is very straightforward for the bank. It's no. Like, they don't have to. There's a lot of risk, a lot of resources required, some difficulties in terms of language and culture, and we're not going to make any money on it. So, like, why would we say yes? So I just want to say, so why are we saying yes at Oikos? We're a bank, and of course we have to address all of these things as well. And I would say, first of all, as I mentioned, we have a social mission that we want to address the financial inclusion of marginalized groups. So we have a motivation and a driver from that. It's something that we need to do when we want to do it. And secondly, we have a partnership with Finklusiv, and that helps us to reduce some of the costs and also to minimize some of the risks. So we still have a lot of costs, and we still certainly have a lot of risks, but the partnership helps us to reduce those so we can go forward with our social mission. So I just want to end by my little speech here by saying thank you to the organizers for allowing us to put this on the agenda today, because it's something that we at Oikos cannot do alone. There are so many business owners in Denmark who don't have access to a bank, and for the majority of them, they're not asking for a lot. They just ask for a business account. They don't need credit. They don't need loans. A lot of the time, they don't need advice. They just need access to the financial infrastructure that we have in Denmark that you need access to in order to operate a business, so that they can provide for themselves and also for their families.
Githa, thank you for making sure that we're not here to say banks are the villains. They're not. They also have to follow certain regulations that are out there, and they have to follow. And they say a bank doesn't like to take risks, and their clients that are being presented are coming with a risk profile. So I'm happy that even if it's technical, you're making clear that this is not on the banks only, but you're also showing with your example that it is possible if you make it to your mission. And so the goal here is to find a way to create maybe more banks who could make it possible for these entrepreneurs to have a business account that we take often probably as privileged ones for, you know, for granted. It's if you are Danish or if you come with a different profile. Me as an entrepreneur, it wasn't that difficult to open a bank account at my bank where I was had already a private account. So thank you so much for clarifying that. All right, next, Christian. You have a very diverse career path. You're a former member of parliament. You served as the Minister of Development Cooperation. You also served as the Secretary General of the Danish Refugee Council, and now you're teaching human rights and rights-based development as SDU, and you're also the manager of warfare, where you trade products from conflict and war-ridden countries, such as Afghanistan, DRC, and Syria, just to count a few. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? How did you come about establishing warfare, and how does it work, and who is involved in all of it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hacer, and thank you very much to Finklusiv, the Democracy Festival, Celebrate Oikos, for inviting me here as well, and I'm very happy to be here. It's an important topic for us and for many, of course, poor people, for many refugee people around in the world. It's a critical topic, financial inclusivity. I have to correct you first. We don't trade with Syria. I have to say this very loud, because if I don't correct this, I may be kicked out of my third bank tomorrow.
My mistake.
So on the record, and I will return to this question in a moment. But in warfare, we deal with a different type of inclusivity, namely inclusivity in international trade, and that's linked to inclusivity in the banking sector. And I have traveled in Somalia, in Yemen, in Afghanistan. I've seen these amazing products that they actually produce, despite these very difficult circumstances they live in. They still get up every morning and produce amazing products, but they don't have a chance to sell them to our part of the world because nobody dares to buy them. And this is why I started Warfare as a company, and it's fair with an I. It's not warfare, it's warfare. And we started Warfare to try to deal with this issue. And the first thing that happened was I called my bank. I'd been in the bank for 35 years at that point. My uncle had been a bank director for this bank once. They knew me very well. And I called them and I said, I want a new account because I'm going to start this business. And they said, interesting, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to trade with Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia. And then they kicked me out. They virtually kicked me out of the bank, you know. And I was actually personally offended, but more than that, I, of course, was even more concerned by the many people who are much less known than I and don't have a CV and friends and documents, whatever, as I have, and their access to the financial sector. It took us a while to get another bank. We used 2 months on this, actually. In the end, I want to praise Oikos. First and foremost, I know Oikos as a very good and conscious bank, and I've known them for a long time. But I also want to praise a bank that often do not get praised in Denmark, at least. It's the Danish bank, Danske Bank, because they actually took the effort to really try to understand what I wanted to do, and they really did a long 1.5 hour on the 23rd of December, actually, I think, a 1.5 hour interview in the late afternoon on the 23rd of December down here on Holmens Kanal, and it was a KYC interview. Is that correct? Yeah. Know your customer interview, where they really tried to understand what I wanted to do, and in the end they came back and said, it's okay, we will approve you. We have since then been kicked out of 2 other banks, actually. International banks, because President Trump, he suddenly enforced, or he designated the Houthi movement in Yemen as a terrorist organization. And then we got kicked out of Stripe and Shopify payments immediately. It took us a long while to get our website up running again. Then President Biden luckily reversed that decision, but it took the banking sector 2 months to, adjust their policies to the different signals they got from the presidents in the US. Now we are back in Stripe and Shopify payments again. But I'm just saying this to illustrate that even for a company like ours, if you are in any way affiliated with countries of conflict, the countries that, of course, or unfortunately, of course, are the host countries of most refugees, if you are in any way affiliated with them, it's just uphill. Even if you have been a former minister and have a Danish company and no criminal record or can speak fluently Danish and in a good day English, you are up. It's uphill. And how do we solve it? I know you're going to ask me that, but I'm just going to take a little bit of it. We have to do exactly what Finklusiv and Oikos are doing. We have to share risk. We have to find new ways of sharing risk and helping each other to overcome this obstacle of lack of inclusion in the financial sector for countries and citizens that perhaps need it the most. And this is also what we do in warfare. We take the risk out of the supply chain. When we now sell saffron in Irma, a Danish shop, you can go into Irma and there's saffron from Afghanistan, and we are really proud of that and happy for it. And the only way they said yes to it is because we took all the risk. We took risk of paying to Afghanistan. We took the risk of controlling the company, doing our KYC with the company, due diligence. We just checked them in any aspect we could, and we had critical journalists in Afghanistan helping us checking them, and we did questionnaires and we checked them on the internet with the native Danish Afghan people who in any Afghan language could check them and control them. We have talked to stakeholders, whatever. We have done a lot of work to try to make sure that these companies were okay, and they are okay. And then we got the products up here and we could do the payments back there. And whenever we have to do a payment cross-border, we of course send the due diligence report, the invoices, information on the order, everything, to the bank. So it is a lot of work, and nobody can do it alone. So you have to do it together. But I will also here appeal to the banking sector as such. Try at least to do an effort for people who are at risk of being totally marginalized, for countries that risk being totally excluded from international issues. Try to do an effort. See it as your corporate social responsibility and your social conscience, as Oikos would say it, to try to contribute here. Don't do CSR in giving money to whatever. Do CSR in what you're good at, namely trying to include people in the financial sector and giving them access to financial services. That's the best thing you can do, and I really hope the Danish banking sector will do it. And I also hope that those who regulate the banks will maintain an understanding of how it is important to shape the regulation in a way where we don't squeeze out everybody. Because as my auditor says to me, Christian, he says, there are 8-10 countries in the world, and everybody knows if you want to keep out of trouble, don't do anything there. And Christian, you have chosen all of them to work with. How stupid is that? But these 10 questions and their citizens are just, people just totally keep a distance to them, and that is going to worsen the problems of the world and the problems that these citizens and countries they experience.
Thank you, Christian. You clearly have not taken the easiest path when it comes to making business. You could make business with countries just in Europe, but no, when you use actually the word CSR, corporate social responsibility, it actually sounds like you mean it, which is really refreshing. It's great to see how you go the extra mile. You are building bridges with countries that are, you know, the most rejected, I'm gonna say. So, and it doesn't scare you away. You're like, no, I'm gonna try and be rejected myself in my own country, be blocked from the banks, but that's not gonna hold me back to sit on the 23rd of December and have an interview and get all these complicated questions probably where I'm gonna be accused of, you know, getting into sketchy businesses, and you're like, no, I'm gonna sit down with you, answer all these questions, and make sure that these people will be treated with dignity and respect. That's really honorable. Thank you so much. All right, let's open the debate. That's why we are here. Let me start right away with you, Githa. You are here and representing a bank, so you're probably the one that is most familiar with the anti-money laundering policies. So could you just tell us a bit what these policies are and why do they essentially exist?
I can try.
Thank you.
Well, of course, the anti-money laundering, or AML as we call it, regulation and policies, it's important, very important, that has been kind of, well, not introduced, but improved, because we have seen scandals where, as you're all aware, we've seen scandals where there was a lot of money laundering happening and the banks were not reacting. So of course it's a response to that, to say, well, you cannot just as a financial institution sit there and let money go through your bank and do nothing. So what we do, I can just use our daily work as an example. It's like every day we have AML alarms in our IT system that shows us when something unusual has happened in one of our customers' accounts. So let me use you as an example, Asha. If you've said to us, you're a customer with us. I have a good profile for that, yeah. You're a customer with us and you've said, well, I don't make international transfers and I don't expect to make any. And then all of a sudden, you find out that you have a relative who wants to give you a big birthday present and she happens to live in Switzerland. So you get this present into your account. Then our IT system would react to that and say, wait a minute, she said she wasn't going to receive any international transfers, and all of a sudden she's received a small amount, let's say 20,000 kroners. And I would then look at that alarm and have to make a judgment and say, okay, is this suspicious? And if I felt, okay, I know you very well and you mentioned to me once that you had a relative in Switzerland, I think this is, fine. I can kind of process that alarm and do the next one. But if I thought that's a little bit odd, I would give you a call and ask you, and then I have to then make a decision and say, okay, do I believe what you're saying? So a lot of these alarms we have to kind of process every single day. And of course, the more complicated a customer, the more alarms, and there are also some risk assessments. So if I knew you had ties to a war-torn country, I would get more alarms probably on you than another customer. So there's a lot of that going on in all the banks. And that's only just in general terms. So of course you have to have someone sit there every day and address these alarms instead of providing good customer service or do all the other things that we also want to do, and we also have to document it, right? So in general terms, that's what the AML is. And in terms of the KYC, it's the know your client. We have to document that we know all of our clients. And knowing is not that I know you, because that's not good enough in terms of regulation. I can't say, well, I know this client. She's been a client with us for 20 years. We have certain requirements in terms of documentation that we have to be able to provide on all clients. So there is a lot of work, and a lot of it is good, but some people and some businesses then kind of, they say they suffer under this, because of course we want to minimize the number of work or the number of alarms that we have to address, and we want to minimize the work. Or at least we have to see that there's a business case for it. And I think what I was thinking about when you said CSR is that normally you think that CSR is a good thing for a company, right? It's something that will give you good publicity. People will be happy. They want to be a customer with your company. But in this case, and for us, there's a lot of risk connected to this kind of CSR. Because what happens, so I can take our business owners. We have, right now, I think we have 34 active refugees who are customers with our bank. We're a very small bank, so for us that's a big number. And we've done everything that we have to do in terms of regulation. We've also done more because of the cooperation that we have with Finklusiv. So we have everything that we need to do. But what happens if one of these businesses get into trouble anyway? And I think that's the biggest risk for us. It's that who's then responsible? And you know, you can do all your homework and you can do all that you need to do, but you will still have people who let you down, or you will have people who, you know, misuse your trust. So what happens for us as a bank if one of these people should, you know, let us down? Would we then be at the front of the newspapers saying that, oh, there's a case of money laundering and this was the bank that let it happen? Or even worse, there's been, you know, financing of terror. And this was Oikos. Oikos was the bank who, you know, enabled this. And I think that's one of the biggest risks, that even if we as a financial institution say, okay, we're ready to take on this risk, the reputational risk is just so big that even though we're doing this and we're excited about it and we see that these, you know, people are great and they're doing a lot of good work, it's still a huge risk that we're taking on. And I don't know how to address that.
Thank you, Githa. That makes perfectly sense. And your reputation is always at stake. And the more clients you have, and the more work is for you. So kind of also makes sense if bigger banks don't want to take on smaller clients because they already they have bigger fish to fry, I'm going to say. So I don't know what the solution is, but we're going to talk about that. Thank you so much for clarifying. So Marie, how do you think these policies create limitations for your clients or for someone who is a refugee?
Yeah. Does it work? Yeah. So you're speaking about the reputational risk of taking on these clients, but I also want to ask, what's the reputational risk of not taking on these clients? Because I also feel that, you know, you have kind of the impact of making shortcuts and shying away from, you know, some of these clients. The impact on these people's lives is so big that at some point, you know, I think that there could be a big reputational problem at some point for some banks if the word gets out. I mean, we're contacted also by people who, because they make a mistake, for example, if they have, you know, they have an account and the bank sees a transaction that they're asking question about. And we had that recently, one of the business owners we worked with. So the bank asked a question about a transaction that they were unsure about. They didn't feel safe that this was a good transaction. They asked question to the business owner. They send the request to the e-box. This is quite technical. And, you know, the business owner doesn't put enough attention on this, overlooks it, has a lot of issues in his life, doesn't answer the question. And then a month later receives a letter from his bank saying, you have not answered my questions about this transaction. We don't feel safe with you as a client. We're going to close your private account as well, you know. And we've had people like that, you know, kicked out of their bank. And, you know, of course, these business owners should answer the questions of their bank. I mean, money laundering is a catastrophe. If there is money laundering, we create a lot of poverty with that. You know, it just creates a society that we do not want. So it's super important that we but maybe, you know, throwing out a customer because he hasn't answered in the right way or, you know, quickly enough makes a huge impact on the life. I mean, imagine in cashless society Denmark, finding yourself without a private account. We were talking with this man, a father also. He could not park his car legally, you know, and pay for his fine because he had no business account. He could not do anything in Denmark because he had no business account, no private account, sorry. So I feel also that, you know, being afraid of the reputational risk creates so much difficulties in people's lives that sometimes it could be worth, to look a little bit more. If the person doesn't answer your email, well, maybe try give them a call, send them an SMS, try a little harder, and not throw them out, because it just creates more poverty and more difficulties for everyone. And we're getting more and more of those people that are being thrown out. So some shortcuts are taken, and I understand, where they're coming from. But I think that, putting a little more effort in keeping people, with their transaction lawful would go a long way.
Thank you, Marie. That makes sense. They're saying, just take your time, and the shortcuts will only dehumanize these people who are dependent. Their livelihood is dependent on their accounts. So just a little more time would be highly helpful. My next question goes maybe both of you, both Christian and Marie. I was just wondering, could you give us examples who could become a victim of financial exclusion on the basis of your experience? Maybe Christian, you could start.
Well, the victims we've heard much. It can be the taxi owner, and it can be a Shadian who produces licorice and supports a lot of families in northern Afghanistan who are kicked out of the banking systems and are therefore deprived of the opportunity to pursue their dreams and their companies and create income and wealth for families. So, but I would like to say, as a response to the debate here, I think one of the things that we have used in order to tackle the problem is transparency. Transparency is, in my opinion, the most forceful tool we can utilize in order to tackle this problem. And if you go to our website, for instance, we produce due diligence reports for every company that we work with, and we put them out there on the website. You can see all kinds of details on these companies. Then we have a complaint mechanism. So we have an email you can write to if you see, so you are trading with Zebra Foods, but I know that they are doing money laundering, and I know whatever, that they are not involved in a corruption case. You can send this information to a complaints mechanism. And we have an ethical committee with 3 people who are dealing with complaints. We haven't had any yet, but who are also supervising our and approving our due diligence reports for the companies and looking into them. And I just had a meeting with my ethical committee just before coming here because of Afghanistan now. Because on the positive side for my small company is that we've beaten all records in terms of orders the last few days on pine nuts and apricot kernels and saffron and licorice roots and almonds and all of it that we import from Afghanistan. So many Danes have said we want to do something, and they have issued orders. So we have that's a good size. But what we fear is, of course, that Afghanistan will end like Syria now. Suddenly, there's so many sanctions will be imposed that it's impossible for us to work. Or the other risk that Taliban will come and take over some of the companies, and the money that we trade will suddenly end in the wrong hands or be used for purposes that we don't even ourselves want to acknowledge. And how do we deal with this problem? Transparency. Our ethical committee will have now the minutes from their meeting out on our website. They will stress how we will monitor the situation. We will emphasize what borderlines we may have in terms of trading with companies in Afghanistan ourselves, and also send a signal that thereby we try to be open about the risks that we face. So I think transparency can be used, and I don't know if I can recommend anything to Finklusiv and Oikos, but for these small business owners, the more they can be transparent and put their accounts out on their own website, or share everything they do, or the easier it may be for Oikos to engage with them as customers. And I don't know also, you said CSR can be a risk in the banking sector. Yes, but if you are transparent about you do this, if you put on your website, we take in refugees because we think they should have a chance, we do our due diligence and our KYCs, and we do all this, but we are open as a bank that this is a risk we take, then I think the day something goes wrong, you won't be blamed as much as if you do what some banks have done, and I won't point fingers, namely been totally secretive about it. We have in a former Russian country, we have a banking account here, and we are totally hiding it, and we don't tell about it. You know, transparency is the way forward, I think, on some of these issues. That's how we can beat the financial exclusion.
Thank you, Christian. Answered like a politician. You already went into the solution part, but maybe the question about victims is more obvious in the field you work with. Maybe Marie, you're working in the country. Maybe you could give us also some examples, like I guess it's not only the refugees, so who could be a victim of financial exclusion here within the country?
Yeah, so we've talked now a lot about how a refugee could be a victim of this because of their short residencies and the nature of the businesses in which they often go in. But I hear more and more that there is also financial exclusion for other groups. People who are starting a business very young, have no history with their bank. You have people who have had financial difficulties in the past. They have a bad credit history. They're going to have difficulties if they want to start something new. So you will have, the more vulnerable groups very often that will be a victim of this. And we say that, there's no money to be made there, and that's a big part of the problem. But I want to argue, who knows? Some of them do grow, and some of them, usually when they contact us, they have some sort of a plan where they want to have more employees, and they can become a bigger business, going forward. I also want to argue for them that they are very transparent, at least the one that's, that come to us and ask for our help because they've faced, so much exclusion. They've been talking to so many banks. They're willing to do anything. I mean, they would send their grandmother's transactions to me, if I asked for them. They're like, take everything. I need a business account, I have this business. It's ready to run. I've been on Kontanthjelp, like a third of them have been on social support before they contacted us. So a lot of them are in this momentum in their life, I want to do something now for myself, for my family, and be fully integrated. And for them, it's completely unforeseen that just a business account would be so difficult, right? So yeah, that's the kind of businesses I would say.
Thank you, Marie. We're running a bit out of time. I'll give you each 2 minutes you can also answer her within those 2 minutes, Christian. Just what's the way forward? Like, what are the solutions you can think of to make transactions as business owners while also fulfilling banks' expectations? You want to start, Christian?
I actually just want to ask a question to Marie, namely, you say transparency, yes, but do you put them on your website? Do you share openly that you have this taxi driver, refugee background as a customer, and here's his accounts, and if you see anything around this company, you can complain to you or whatever, and therefore kind of give him the credibility by sharing openly the information he gives you, of course with his approval, in order to boost transparency and make Oikos more confident that this is a customer that dares to be very transparent and therefore expose himself or herself to the public scrutiny that comes with scrutiny, with transparency.
No, I don't. But I also have some obligations, for their GDPR, for their, their privacy. So I cannot share information that is given to me. I need their consent to receive their information and forward it to the bank. So, it's all very regulated. So I'm not doing that, I must admit. Yeah.
Let's talk solutions, and then we can debate among each other. And I also promised that the audience can ask questions, and I would enjoy also the debate between us, definitely. Maybe, Githa, as a bank, what do you think the way forward is?
I'll be very quick. I think transparency is, of course, key. And we are, if you go on the Oikos website, you'll see that we have this project. We're quite proud of it. And I just want to say that I think I mentioned before that the perceived risk of these business owners is high. But I can say now we have now 34 customers, and they're just customers like everyone else. You know, once they're in, once they're used to the way that we do business in Denmark, once they know the expectations, which Marie is doing a lot of work to talk to them about, and we've established relationship, we don't spend a lot of time on them. I mean, we monitor them like we have to, and we're there, we're a good bank for them, but the risk is not as high as the perceived risk. So the actual risk is lower, but you have to actually experience that, I think, to believe it. And right now, I mean, these people are hairdressers, bicycle shops, very, very small businesses, very easy business cases. We don't need to sit down an hour and a half to do KYC. And the reality is that for a lot of these people, the banks don't want to waste any time, so they're not invited in for a KYC meeting. A lot of the time, they don't even get a personal phone call. They just get a response, written response back saying, we're not interested. And as a private customer, you actually have a right in Denmark to get a NEM account. So the banks are not allowed to turn you away as a private customer, but there's no such law or right when it comes to businesses. So the banks are entitled to just say, no, we're not interested. And I know that there's been some political pressure on the minister to say, is that really fair? Should we have something similar for businesses, that they actually have a right to a business account? They don't need credit cards or loans or anything, just a simple business account so they can operate. But so far the response has been, we will encourage the banks to open business accounts. So there's no pressure on the banks, there's no requirement that the banks have to do it, they're just being encouraged. And so the banks say no.
Okay, thank you. Marie?
Yeah, I'll do it very quick. We're going the way of education and training. So we are sitting with the business owners and explaining to them, you know, there may be a cultural difference about how they would make business in their country and how you make business here. So we do sit and explain, and you know, we tell them what the culprits are, and be careful because, you know, we've had experiences where this and that mistake was made. If the bank asks you a question, you know, be quick to answer. The risk is so high for you. So we go and try to support them, you know, with the education, and I think that's also a very important part of what we do.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I feel like there's at least one question from the audience. Is it okay if you come up and talk to the microphone? Or there's one coming.
Check, check. Here you go. Thank you so much, and thank you a lot to the panelists. This is incredibly interesting. My name is Fanny. I work for an international NGO called CARE, and I've been working with Danish Refugee Council before and other international NGOs. And on the side, I also work with a small organization in Denmark called Vores Asylbørn that helps legally and with social work asylum seekers who needs to apply again for their residency. And I have a question per hat, if that's okay. First, to you, Marie, and probably Githa too. What we see now is that refugees' status are being revoked, and they have to reapply now every 2 years, and I'm max 2 years. What we see now is more 1 year, so every year many refugees in Denmark have to reapply. Do you see this as a worsening factor, or do you already foresee that this will present even more difficulties for them? Because one of the risks you mentioned was the temporary stay, obviously. So that was my first question. I'll let you answer that.
I think I can only speak on behalf of Oikos. When it comes to just a business account, we don't have a lot of risks around it once it's established, because we don't offer credit on it, and there's no credit card, there's no automatic payment service, and so forth. So if they are sent out of the country, then we would have a business account that would then be closed down. So the risk is minimal. We are looking together with Marie to develop a credit product, because we also see that some of these businesses do need to borrow money, and so we're actually looking to introduce that in the next 6 months. And of course, then the situation is different, because can we, lend money when with a payment period, sorry, of like 24 months if the residency has to be evaluated after a year. Probably not. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. This is actually linked to both hats, but mostly my international NGOs are right now facing a lot of pushback as well from banks to work in all the countries Christian actually mentioned. And this is mostly due to counterterrorism regulations inside the EU. So I know it's not money laundering, but this is exactly the same principle of controlling what comes in and out. And although we're humanitarian organizations, we still can't operate in certain country or yes, like some financing flows are being blocked and so on. And this is in whole EU. France is taking sort of the forefront of the fight. They are, I don't know if they still are, but many French NGOs were on strike against their home donor to actually complain that they need to do beneficiary screening and so many control, and that was not okay for humanitarian programs. So my question is that I see this very linked to what you described tonight, and I wanted to ask you, how much is it about politics and how much is it about real business cases? Because in all the criteria you mentioned, Githa, I see a lot of very valuable business issues, but actually it seems that what prevails is the trust you have or not in the client, and trust in society is very much linked, and so I see it as very much political actually. So yes, what do you think about this, the three of you? Thank you. And what would be the solution? Thank you.
Christian, maybe?
Thank you. First, I would just like to note on your first question, I think was important, because obviously the issue of citizenship means a lot for financial inclusion. And without citizenship, and I think the rules we have created for refugees, temporary status, is obviously harming their integration into Danish society and their access to financial services and their possibilities to act as entrepreneurs and utilize all the skills they have, and I think it's wrong. On the other issue of the scrutiny given to also international NGOs right now, I hear it and see it. I've been in the sector as well and seen the obstacles, and some of it is of course created by a lot of bad cases, as I think Githa said. You know, there has been a lot, not necessarily by NGOs, but certainly by companies and the banking sector. There has been some very devastating cases of money laundering, whitewashing, whatever it's called, and supporting illegal activities around because of lack of scrutiny, and this has to be addressed. Again, I don't have the solution. I think Githa on the technical side can say more, but I would say on the NGO side, I really believe some NGOs could also do more in terms of transparency. Because cases of anti-corruption and illegal activities, whatever, some NGOs have been very, very, shying away from sharing these experiences openly, and I think it's necessary that they do it. I was once an international director of an NGO where we put, and we did it also in the Danish Refugee Council when I came in there, we put out every single corruption case we had. We would put them out on the website and say we have this many corruption cases, we have in these countries, whatever. Because only by extreme transparency can you create trust, and trust is what you live from. And a lot of the political kind of reactions you've seen towards NGOs and companies is because the trust is gone, and then you face a lot of regulations and scrutiny that can hinder your work.
All right. I have many, many more questions, but I want to respect everybody's time and who, came while heavy rain in Copenhagen, great weather. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all three for sharing your expertise, sharing also your pain, and what the work you do is not easy, and it faces many, many obstacles, but you're all doing it despite the obstacles. That's really, really honorable. Thank you for sharing all your perspectives with us, and thank you also for the to the organizers that has given us the stage today. And yeah, thanks for being here, and thanks to all who are gonna watch it later or who have been with us for the last 1 hour. Thank you all for coming.